Hello War of the Visions fans, I'm Jackie Fox, and today we're going to be talking about Arena, because if you're anything like me, you've been playing a lot of Arena lately trying to unlock Folka. And some of you may be finding this more challenging than others, and some of you may have also noticed that there's just a little bit missing from my Get to Know an Element guide that I released recently. I even kind of mentioned it in the video that this wasn't the complete picture. If you haven't seen it and you need a refresh on the wotv meta, I think it's really helpful, either as a new player or as someone returning to the game. But it's also a testament to how complex the state of PvP in this game is right now that alone doesn't cover the big picture. It just does a really good job of helping you understand units, and that's one of the biggest ways that we interact with the game through a gacha, so I think it's the most important part, but this is definitely going to help too. If you need to understand units, that's probably the best way to go, but there's a whole other dynamic to this game that more largely revolves around vision cards. So let me explain. For the longest time in this game, the larger power level that could be found through vision cards was relegated to mono-elemental teams at the beginning of the game. There was a bit of elemental complexity to the teams before that because there wasn't really anything that rewarded us for building mono-elemental teams. Therefore, bait teams and teams that counteracted their own weaknesses were relatively common. By using a third member of a complementary element, there really was no reason not to build teams like this. But then master abilities on the unit side started giving effects to mono-elemental teams, and in addition to that we started seeing mono-elemental vision cards as well that just didn't work for these teams. And as these became the strongest strategies in the game and compounded on each other, that really pushed the way that we understood the game, and that's largely the way that previous video looks at it. But there has been a new power level introduced to the game around a year ago, and we need to talk about 2 or 3 of these newer concepts to really understand what's going on in this video. The first is going to be just kind of a side note, but Elder VCs, in that everything that I'm going to be talking about here is Elder VC eligible. I mean, I guess except for technically Hollow VCs can't be eldered, but most of the VCs that I'm talking about today, I guess, can be. And this is just going to introduce a whole lot of extra power to them on the stat side, but it's also going to increase the amount of power that they give you from the vision card in the sub slot, which is why you should prioritize that first, because that is really so all your sub VC should be elders. If you're using a PvP formation, if you've got one that's really well established, then you should go ahead and elder those. Thankfully, they give us some resources to do this, so you can do at least a couple of them. And then, since it also boosts the power of the stats on your main VCs, maybe you should do some of them as well if you can afford it. The other thing another thing that's adding to this big complex picture is the reincarnation system. A lot of newer units may not seem as though they are super competitive right out of the box as soon as they hit 140, because at this point in the game, especially once you get higher into the arena, you're going to be fighting against units that are either brand new and kind of optimally good, or units that have been reincarnated a lot. And sometimes you'll run into an intersection of those two things where they've been reincarnated a lot and they're brand new, so they're very, very powerful, which is kind of a thing that's only available to the Giga Whales, unfortunately. But it also doesn't happen too often, it's just a thing that's going to increase more as you get up in the ranks. This is one of the factors that can make even older units that I pointed out in my units video worth playing. If you have them well reincarnated, or you feel like investing in them, they can still duke it out with the best of them, and they could still be a part of your powerful and top tier team, but really you have to rely on having more reincarnations for them than some of the units that they're facing, just to make up for some of the power creep that's happened between them. And honestly, this makes the game a lot more balanced between its newer and older units than perhaps it should be, and that's pretty cool, but also really creates a high power ceiling for the Giga Whales. So moving on from that, what we're really going to be mostly talking about today is job-based vision cards. For newer players or people who don't really have their heads wrapped around the vision card system, you're probably wondering, as I'm getting started, what should I prioritize? After all, you can do up to 6 vision card hard quests per day, so you can build up a full team's worth of vision cards all at the same time, albeit pretty slowly if that's your only method of getting new shards for those cards. But as you're building them up, you're probably wondering, like, what do I prioritize? And I'm going to show you that as I go through the builds for 2 of my teams, one of which is better than the other, obviously, but also one of which might show you some of the ways that you can bridge the gaps as well. So, build first around a weapon type and then bridge the gap as best you can with more generic cards. So you want to be looking at those newer VCs, which incidentally are easier to buy shards for in a number of ways. In the Mog Shop, there's at least 2 or 3 ways of doing this, so check it out. Maybe 4 or 5 at any given point in the month. And that's really pretty cool. It can help you build up your first 6 pretty quickly and catch you up into the game. But the absolute S tier thing that you can get on a vision card is gonna be agility. You want the biggest agility boosts you can in your main slot and the second biggest agility boost you can in your sub slot on pretty much every team that you're going to build. There isn't a team that benefits from being slow, and if you're slow and everybody else is fast, well, that's a problem for you. The A tier kind of thing to get on your vision card are attack power-ups. And there's a number of ways to power up attack. You could power up your attack, your magic, you could power up your specific penetrations, which is going to work better and be a little bit more niche, but also is kind of an extra way of layering in more damage to a weapon type oriented team as opposed to a more weapon agnostic light team or elementally based team. But also one of the better ones here, and one that's really common on job-based vision cards at this point, is Maneater. And you can get Maneater for both physical and magical. It's just very beneficial for most units you're going to face in PvP especially. So this is a very cool PvP offensive strategy. And then probably sharing that tier, the only real defensive strategies I would really promote on vision cards are AoE and unit attack resistance. You want to get these on your main slot, maybe not necessarily in your sub unless you have an Elder VC, but you really want to build these things up as much as you can because this is the way that modern units mitigate damage. It is the most powerful, it's always been here, and it's always been a good idea to use these things on your team, and it's kind of becoming more common now and more necessary as well. And there's also a lot of units that are being released now that natively have resistances to these things, so getting a lot of resistance from your vision cards in addition to that for some units can push them over thresholds to where they're barely taking damage from a plethora of different types of attack. Like half of the attacks in the game barely do damage to them now, and that's something that might be hard to balance into the future without giving unit attack resistance or AoE resistance penetration, which is also the kind of the end of the game on an offensive level, I think, unless there are really other reliable ways of defending yourself added to the game and added to things like this. So I think that this is one that they aren't likely to devalue anytime in the immediate future, except to say that you may see more unit attack resistance lowering and more area attack resistance lowering attacks in the future. But penetration, I think, is a bridge too far. And then everything else that's a defensive thing that's put onto a vision card is kind of only okay. They're a lot of more nicher than others. There are some that are better than others, but in the interest of keeping this short, they're all just kind of icing on the cake. You really want offense and speed, AoE resistance, unit attack resistance, and then whatever else you can get. And now even the bonuses in Arena are job-based. We're really seeing boosts, especially this week, to Katana teams, and this is going to benefit Dario a lot, and I think really speaks to kind of his optimal optimal usage in Arena right now, being on a job-based vision card synergy team. Now, it's been long enough at this point that not only are there 6 katana vision cards that can make like a physical katana team, but I've also seen a team that can use Dario as its tank, uses exclusively katana and black mage vision cards. Dario in front of 2 powerful mages. That's also a pretty powerful team as well. Again, fully utilizing those job-based vision cards, and probably also Elder VCs and a good bit of reincarnation on some of the other supporting units as well. All of those things are going to come together, and it starts to be a little bit like a checklist. Do you have your Elder VCs? Do you have your newer units? Do you have your job-based VCs? Do you have elemental synergies? Do you have all of these things? How many of these pieces can you combine together into the ultimate team? Because I've also seen teams that maybe because they wanted to use the master ability synergies as well, which there isn't really an equivalent for. Like, katana units haven't gained master ability bonuses to other katana units in the same way that they may benefit, in the same way that Dario specifically can benefit other wind units. So you still want to use those bonuses. There's a team right now that's 2B, who recently got refreshed, Dario, who is brand spanking new, and Varush, who has never really been taken seriously but is relatively powerful and can actually play a powerful supportive role on a team, and seems to work pretty well with Dario as well. So this is another team, and the advantage of having a team like this is that if you don't have 6 job-based vision cards for katana, and it's pretty likely that you don't, you could just supplement in slightly weaker but still impressive wind vision cards, or even if you have some of the chaos espers, they're roughly the same power level as job-based vision cards, if not maybe stronger in some ways. So that's a good way to supplement out these teams as well if they share 1 or 2 elements. It's also worth noting that ice and water have such a strong synergy because they have 2 chaos espers for themselves, so they have 2 vision cards that are both at the power level of the newest vision cards, but also benefit both elements simultaneously, which is a pretty neat benefit for them. So a few of the differences you're going to notice between this video and some of my other arena showcases is that while Dario is our newest unit right now, and while there are going to be a number of fights looking at how to best utilize Dario in your party, I don't really have that Dario team to really show off here. I will put in some footage of my Dario team, but it just wasn't really impressing me because I don't either have the newer wind units like I think Zidane and Risol work really well together and really well with Dario as well. That team is really powerful, but it relies on you having picked up a unit that was pretty bad when she came out, or picked her up recently, which feels bad, and picking up the unit that synergized with her but was even more limited than her and didn't necessarily have that big of a purpose, while being a pretty powerful damage dealer outside of it, especially because in terms of jobs, Dagger is just really bad, just really not helping itself. It may have gotten a little bit better recently, but woof. I think at least when I was looking into it around Zidane or Risol time, it was just really bad. But I also don't have 2B, I haven't built up Varush, so really I'm trying to run Dario in replacement of June in a more classic wind team because mine hasn't been updated in a while. And I really don't think that that's the best way of going about it. So I wanted to show you other ways of doing that, but I also wanted to show you a variety of strategies, and I wanted to pick some fights that I thought I might lose, in part to show you what teams might be able to, through using some unexpected combination of the factors that I've just mentioned in this video, to be able to beat a team that, according to the other video, they shouldn't have been able to. And there will be some pretty major upsets in this video, and when I have the presence of mind, I will show you the details of the team that beat me so that you have a good opportunity to copy that or to build a team like that. Because since I'm using most of the strategies that I've already talked about, although I'm not usually leaned as hard into job-based vision cards, I am pretty top tier, at least in reincarnation, in most teams, except for maybe the last one that I'm going to be showing you today, or one of the last ones that I'm going to be showing you today. So any team that manages to take that down was doing something right. First thing I want to say here, if you haven't seen my short on Folka, you definitely should see that. That's going to tell you everything you need to know about the different strategies for unlocking Folka at various speeds, including the lazy man strategy, which will take a little bit of while, but it's also by far the least effort. But for what I'm going for, I'm optimizing for 10 fights a day. This is gonna probably land me around 3,000 to 4,000 in arena if I'm having a bad week, maybe closer to 5,000. So I might want to get some extra fights in at the end of the week if I'm having a bad week, just to kind of solidify my place before the week ends. But with all of that being said, that's a space where 4,000 players can fit in, and 3,999 of you could be my viewers, but I'm gonna fight you for that 4,000th slot for sure. There's a couple of arena specific things that I should point out, and that is the bonus system is going to get you bonus points for specific characters, either newer ones or ones that complement them, and also vision cards. There's usually some staple vision cards in here, so this is pretty easy to get and to do. It may lower your team's power level a little bit to use one of those staples, but they tend to put in some older rainbow stuff that's pretty weak but also pretty applicable to everyone. So it should be easy to slot something like that. Slotting in one of the newer characters, especially if you don't have the newest characters this week, can be a little bit harder, and don't sabotage yourself by doing this, but just know that those bonus points will serve you really well if you do manage to get a bunch of wins, and that'll just make you a lot safer, and maybe even safer on less fights than, maybe giving you the opportunity to skip your extra 5 fights a day once or twice if you can build up a really, really high score over the first maybe 6 days of the week. So let's get into the arena footage. So if you learn these fundamentals and take some inspiration from this video, then I hope that you will have no problem placing within the top 1 to 5,000 every week in arena from now into the foreseeable future because of my good advice. So happy Folka hunting, and let's get into the arena footage.